Hello again. Welcome back to It's Not Perfect and That's Okay. I'm trying a new structure this time, breaking the chosen series up into different videos and focusing on specific shared aspects of the writing. In this case, the world building, another day, plot or characters, etc., so that the videos are more manageable and clear cut. With that in mind, we'll be discussing Avatar the Last Airbender's world building and some contentions I have with it. Be they how it was handled, introduced, utilised in the plot, or otherwise existed in the world. But as before, this doesn't mean the series is bad, merely that I don't see these points come up in critical discourse or analysis enough for my liking, if at all, so let's begin. But first and as always, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible, links below. 1. Why does removing Ozai's bending mean he's no longer a threat? Just to be clear, I am glad Aang found a way to defeat Ozai and maintain his beliefs. Even ignoring that a child shouldn't be forced into that role, he's the last survivor of his people and culture. Maintaining their beliefs in himself is integral, and I'm glad that idea was respected. But all the same, and despite the title, we know the nobility in the Fire Nation don't rely on bending ability, and Ozai's combat skills was never why he was in charge in the first place. His greatest feat before the finale was burning a chunk off his son's face, who was 14 and not fighting back. The next time we see him fight before the finale, his extra speedy lightning technique gets turned back on him by that same kid and he instantly loses. Plus, as mentioned, his combat abilities never played a part in his position, it was bloodlines and political maneuvering. I bring this up because it's treated as necessary to have discovered energy bending and thus introduced energy bending into the world building in order to remove his bending to stop the war, but the world building doesn't lend itself to that before this point. It seems like just beating him senseless and locking him up somewhere would have been equally sufficient, especially once the comet had passed and he was even less of a match for anyone than before. Kind of minor, but it just kind of bugs me. 2. Next verse, same as the first, but I do feel like the lion turtle was sort of an issue. The foreshadowing is okay. Not great, but it's there. We see a picture and a statue at different points, then that's it until it shows up and grants Aang the ability to resolve his dilemma. Honestly, much like making beating up Ozai so important despite him not being a major material threat on his lonesome or because of his combat abilities, this feels very much like the world building designed to get us to the conclusion over it being a natural evolution of the story or the world, i.e. there needs to be at least some last minute tension about whether or not Aang can win, but we also need the Avatar state to wreck Ozai's shit, so let's add this in. Maybe if it had been brought up sooner or Aang had had to do something in order to learn it, the whole thing would have felt less contrived. It's sort of like the Ultra Divine Water in the King Piccolo saga. The manga just has Goku show up and get it. The anime chose to make getting the water a test unto itself before even the question of surviving taking it was raised, thus the whole thing felt narratively heavy and earned. The Lion Turtle to me just sort of feels like throwing a plot coupon to get to the finale. Not because it gave Aang a way out of killing Ozai, but because the energy bending it taught Aang was used to create unnecessary tension once Aang had already won the fight. And 3. This is the final one and perhaps my biggest gripe, the Sun Warriors and the firebending update tied to their episode. Now I'm not going to talk about the Sun Warriors aesthetic or the whole living in a ruin thing. People other than me have already done a better job than I could. For the uninitiated or those who forgot, after Zuko finally joined the gang he struggled to firebend properly. This was a problem he shared with Aang, which in the latter's case was attributed to his fear of burning someone he cared about like he did last time he used firebending. For Zuko, it's tied to him no longer having a source to pull from, in this case hate and anger, something he reaffirms to the Sun Warriors later, claiming his people distorted the art. And the Sun Warriors basically lean into this as well by saying that firebending in the fire itself is life, not destruction. I have a lot of issues with this. First and foremost, we've seen Zuko totally change goals or lose motivation before and his firebending was unaffected. So why is this only a problem now and not, say, when he gave up on chasing Aang to work in a tea shop, or when he was moping around the capital, or when fighting Combustion Man in the previous episode? What's more, the distortion thing goes so far as to have the old fighting forms lost, hence them thinking the statues were showing a dance over combat forms along with a total change in a fuel source. Except this has never really come up before, nor will it again. So did Sozin invent a wholly new firebending fueled by hate and rage with new forms, and that also falls apart the moment someone loses motivation? Or was the change something that happened over a longer period of time? And if so, again, why replace the old version with something that's so unreliable when older firebending seems to work no matter what? One could argue that it might be a commentary on the inherent weakness of fascism, but it never gets explored before or after this. The only other firebender tied to stuff like rage was Zhao, and that was ascribed to his specific temperament and talents, not national philosophy. What's more, the resolution to Aang's issue is that fire is life, except fire is fire, and it still burns. the emotions behind it don't actually change that. When Aang burnt Katara, he wasn't lashing out in anger, he was playing and showing off and having a good time and burnt her by accident. Nothing about the flames has fundamentally changed for Aang. There's no sudden healing flames that let him avoid using fire while still using firebending, but this somehow resolves both his and Zuko's issues, despite the issues not even being the same and the world building not making much sense. Because Master Zhang-Zhong's point about fire remains true. Fire can only burn. The Sun Warriors did not change this, so control should still be emphasized, but it's not. They got some feel-good vibes and their problems are just gone. Ultimately, the whole thing feels like a contrived mess that serves no real purpose beyond a field trip episode while just confusing the setting and glossing over the characters' actual emotional challenges. And that's that. I hope this new format worked, and thanks for stopping by. If you would like to help support these episodes and get early access to scripts, videos, stories and art, please hit up my Patreon. If you would like to commission 3D art, please swing by my coffee and we can chat. For now though, that's all. Thanks for stopping by.